47 seconds ago, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez did something that made FBI Director Kash Patel's hands visibly tremble for the first time in his entire career. She opened a manila envelope marked with red classification stripes, positioned it directly in front of the C-SPAN cameras so millions could see the CIA letterhead, and began reading from a document that Patel had just testified under oath was destroyed in 2019. The envelope contained a CIA intelligence assessment dated September 15, 2024, authored by the agency's Counterintelligence Mission Center, and personally briefed to Patel 3 days before he became FBI director, detailing a covert operation that would fundamentally alter everything Americans believed about their government's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein's network. But what made Patel's water glass nearly slip from his grasp wasn't just the document itself. It was the handwritten notation in the margin, clearly visible to every camera in the room, bearing Patel's own initials and a single word that would destroy his career. Approved. The House Oversight Committee hearing was scheduled as routine budget oversight, the kind of session where representatives ask predictable questions about resource allocation and operational efficiency. Patel arrived at 10:23 a.m., exactly 7 minutes early, flanked by 3 FBI legal advisors whose briefcases contained carefully rehearsed responses to every anticipated line of inquiry. The first 90 minutes proceeded according to script. Republican members praised Patel's leadership, cited impressive arrest statistics, and commended his aggressive stance on border security operations. Democratic members pressed on controversial topics: the mass reassignment of counterintelligence agents, the abrupt termination of 12 senior FBI officials, and the systematic denial of security clearance renewals for career agents who had previously criticized the Trump administration's policies. Patel deflected each challenge with bureaucratic precision, citing ongoing investigations that prevented detailed disclosure, invoking personnel privacy protections, and referencing national security protocols that required classified session discussions. At 11:47 a.m., Chairwoman Carolyn Maloney recognized Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for her allotted questioning time. The room's atmosphere shifted immediately because seasoned congressional observers understood that Ocasio-Cortez never asked questions unless she possessed documentary evidence that would devastate the witness. She is a former bartender who became one of the most effective congressional interrogators in modern history, a representative who had spent 2 weeks preparing for exactly this moment with methodical precision that would have impressed federal prosecutors. The manila envelope sat closed on her desk, red classification markings clearly visible to every camera angle. The envelope was thicker than usual, suggesting multiple documents inside. Patel noticed it immediately, his eyes tracking to the envelope for just 2 seconds before returning to Ocasio-Cortez's face, and body language experts would later note the micro-expression of concern that flashed across his features. His breathing pattern had already begun to change. "Director Patel," Ocasio-Cortez began, her voice carrying the measured tone of someone who had already won the battle. "I want to discuss the CIA's assessment of foreign intelligence penetration of domestic criminal enterprises, specifically regarding ongoing counterintelligence concerns." Patel's right hand moved unconsciously to adjust his tie, a self-soothing gesture indicating elevated psychological stress. "Of course, Congresswoman, the FBI maintains robust coordination with our intelligence community partners on all matters affecting national security." "Excellent," Ocasio-Cortez said, and there was something in that single word that made every person in that chamber understand that Patel had just walked into a carefully constructed trap. "So you would agree that the FBI takes seriously any intelligence indicating that foreign actors may have compromised American citizens through blackmail or coercion operations?" Patel nodded, still projecting the confidence he would lose in approximately 30 seconds. "Absolutely. Such operations represent one of our highest counterintelligence priorities, and we have dedicated significant resources to identifying and neutralizing these threats." Ocasio-Cortez opened her envelope with deliberate precision, the sound of the paper tearing audible in the silent chamber. Director Patel, are you familiar with CIA Intelligence Assessment IA 2024-0847, dated September 15, 2024? Patel's facial expression showed the first visible sign of genuine alarm, his eyebrows drawing together and his mouth opening slightly before closing again. Congresswoman, without reviewing the specific document, I cannot comment on individual intelligence assessments that may contain sensitive sources and methods. Let me refresh your memory, Ocasio-Cortez interrupted, holding up a document bearing official CIA letterhead with classification markings clearly visible to every camera in the room. This assessment was personally briefed to you by CIA Deputy Director Sarah Chen on September 18, 2024, 3 days before you assumed your current position. The impact was immediate and unmistakable. Patel's hands, which had been resting steadily on the witness table, began to tremble visibly. The tremor started as a barely perceptible shake, but intensified as Ocasio-Cortez continued speaking, becoming so pronounced that when he reached for his water glass, the liquid sloshed audibly against the sides. Camera operators instinctively zoomed in, capturing every detail of his deteriorating composure. Congresswoman, Patel's voice had lost its earlier authority. I would need to review my briefing logs to confirm the specific intelligence products that were presented during my transition period. You don't need to review anything, Ocasio-Cortez said sharply, because I have the briefing memorandum right here, along with your signed acknowledgement receipt. She held up another document. But let me read you the key findings of this CIA assessment. The chamber fell into absolute silence as Ocasio-Cortez began reading, her voice clear and precise. Quote, CIA has assessed with high confidence that foreign intelligence services, primarily Russian SVR and Chinese MSS, have obtained compromising material on approximately 60 American citizens in positions of significant political, financial, and social influence. These materials were acquired through association with convicted sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein's operation between 2002 and 2019. Patel's trembling had become visible to everyone in the room. His left hand gripped the edge of the table so tightly that his knuckles had turned white, while his right hand shook so badly that he could not safely lift his water glass. The assessment continues, Ocasio-Cortez said, her voice rising slightly. Quote, the compromising materials include photographic evidence, video recordings, and financial transaction records that foreign intelligence services are actively using to influence American policy decisions. CIA recommends immediate FBI investigation to identify all compromised individuals and assess the extent of ongoing foreign influence operations. She paused, letting the words settle before delivering the killing blow. The document is signed by CIA Director William Burns and was personally briefed to you, Director Patel, with a specific recommendation for immediate action. She held up the final page. And here is your signed acknowledgement, dated September 18, 2024, with a handwritten notation in your own writing. Ocasio-Cortez read the notation slowly, emphasizing each word. Assessment received. Recommend holding pending political review. KP initial approved. The explosion was immediate and catastrophic. Republican members looked stunned, their prepared defenses crumbling as they realized their witness had just been caught in an indefensible position. Democratic members tried to contain their shock and satisfaction while frantically taking notes. Journalists were typing so rapidly their keyboards sounded like machine guns, and Patel sat frozen, his entire body now visibly shaking, perspiration clearly visible on his forehead under the harsh committee room lighting, his breathing audibly rapid and shallow. Director Patel, Ocasio-Cortez continued, her voice now carrying barely contained fury, this CIA assessment identified 60 Americans being blackmailed by foreign intelligence services using Jeffrey Epstein's operation. 60 Americans whose compromised status poses a direct threat to national security. And your response was to recommend holding the investigation pending political review. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to just above a whisper but still audible throughout the chamber. Political review, Director. Not operational review, not legal review, not security review. Political review. Can you explain to this committee and to the American people what political considerations could possibly justify ignoring foreign blackmail operations against American citizens? 23 seconds of complete silence followed. In congressional hearings, 23 seconds represents an eternity of admission through inaction. Patel sat motionless, his hands trembling so violently that he had to clasp them together on the table, his face drained of all color, his eyes fixed on the document in Ocasio-Cortez's hands. "Director," she said finally, "let me ask you directly. How many of the 60 compromised individuals identified in this CIA assessment are you personally protecting from investigation?" Patel's mouth opened and closed without producing sound, like a fish gasping for air. His legal advisors were frantically whispering among themselves, but their client seemed incapable of processing their advice. "How many, Director Patel?" Ocasio-Cortez pressed. "How many Americans being blackmailed by foreign intelligence services have you decided are too politically sensitive to investigate?" When Patel finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "Congresswoman, the complexities of counterintelligence operations require careful coordination between multiple agencies and consideration of ongoing investigative equities that may not be apparent from individual intelligence assessments." "That's not an answer," Ocasio-Cortez cut him off. "The CIA told you that foreign governments are blackmailing 60 Americans using Jeffrey Epstein's criminal enterprise. You acknowledged receipt of this intelligence, and then you wrote approved next to a recommendation to hold the investigation for political reasons." She stood up, which almost never happens in these hearings. Standing means you're not asking questions anymore. You're making accusations. "Director Patel, based on this documented evidence, it appears you have deliberately obstructed a counterintelligence investigation into foreign blackmail operations for political reasons. That's not law enforcement, Director. That's collaboration." The word collaboration detonated like a bomb in the chamber. Patel tried to stand, but his legs appeared unsteady, his hands still gripping the table for support. "Congresswoman, I categorically reject any implication that I have compromised national security or failed in my duties as FBI director. The characterization of routine interagency coordination as obstruction is both inaccurate and inappropriate." "Routine coordination," Ocasio-Cortez repeated, her voice dripping with incredulity. "Director, this document shows that you personally blocked an FBI investigation into foreign blackmail operations. That's not coordination, that's obstruction." She gathered her papers with theatrical precision. "I move that this committee subpoena all documents related to the CIA's September 2024 intelligence assessment, all communications between Director Patel and political officials regarding this assessment, and all FBI records on the 60 Americans identified as compromised by foreign intelligence services." The hearing devolved into procedural chaos, but the damage was complete and irreversible. Republican members were already distancing themselves, whispering urgently among themselves. Within minutes, video clips of Patel's breakdown went viral worldwide. His visibly shaking hands, his drained face, his complete inability to explain why he had blocked an investigation into foreign blackmail operations. The hashtag #NotChPatelShaking was trending within the hour. Sometimes accountability requires nothing more than a representative with a manila envelope, documentary evidence that cannot be disputed, and the courage to ask simple questions that expose uncomfortable truths. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had asked those questions, and Kash Patel's trembling silence had provided all the answers America needed.